Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our discussion about leasing versus buying a car. My name is Andy Dahl, and I work at Medtronic. Actually, Leah and I both work at Medtronic. Medtronic is a cool place to work, actually. Everybody here rallies around the mission of alleviating pain, restoring health, and extending life. So we ultimately manufacture medical device equipment, products, solutions that help our patients. And you may recognize some of our products, defibrillators, pacemakers. We have pumps that we manufacture for type 1 diabetics. A lot of other products and services that help to alleviate pain, whether it be sensors and neural stimulation devices. So lots of fun stuff. There's a lot to learn. I've been here about 5 years and having a good time. Leah is we work in accounting and finance, specifically our controllership organization. Leah joined us a few months ago as well, so we have the opportunity to work together quite often. As I think about this topic, I think one of the first things first questions I ask myself is, what kind of a vehicle suits you? It's important to understand what you like, what you kind of need transportation for. Do you view it as just sort of a basic point of transportation, get you from A to B, or are you more interested in driving something flashy? Do you have a specific passion around cars or a specific type of car? For me, I've been driving a sedan. I'm a family guy. I've got a few kids, so I need a little more space. So the last couple cars I've had have been sedans. I think in my younger years, I enjoyed driving a coupe and actually a manual transmission, but I'm getting a little too excited here. My passion, I think, is to have something a little sportier. I like to hang on to my cars for a fair amount of time, but I take good care of them. And it is important to me that they look good, and that they're reliable. And so once it gets to the point where I may be questioning one of those two things, it's time to go shopping. So Leah, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Leah Seibel. I, like Andy said, work on his team in the global controllership. I specifically work in external reporting, so I and my team prepare and share the financial statements for Medtronic and to the public. I would say, kind of on the same topic, finding the right car for you is important. And for me, at this point in my life, having something that I can drive pretty far with decent mileage is important. And just because I have family in different locations, and I do a bit of driving up north to the cabin, whatever it is. And also, I think having some four-wheel drive in the winters is a big perk for me. So I've found that a smaller SUV that I can still squeeze into downtown Minneapolis parking spots when needed is a good fit for me. So that's what I'm currently driving. But it's good to have a frame of reference when you go into this process, because there's a lot of options and it can be a bit overwhelming. So we're hopeful that the information we share today can aid you guys in your journey of picking, buying, or leasing a car when that time comes. So I can start. Yeah, let's talk about what it means to lease a car. So when you lease a car, you're basically signing a contract that is you and the dealership are the two parties, and you're paying for the right to drive the vehicle for a fixed period of time. Typically, that's about 3 years, sometimes 4. You'll pay an initial amount to the dealership. That will be your right to drive the car off of the lot. And then you will continue to pay monthly payments over the life of the lease. And that will cover the cost of depreciation of the vehicle, because once it's off the lot, it starts to depreciate. And so you're paying those monthly payments to the dealership to cover that. The big things that you need to understand about leasing a car is that there's certain parts of the contract that you have to adhere to, or they will charge you extra. And that includes a certain number of miles. I think when I last looked, it was about 32,000 was an average amount of miles you could have on a 3-year lease of a car. And the shape of the car. Andy talked a little bit about how he likes to take care of his cars. If you spill something in your car or there's damage to part of the car, they will also charge you extra fees to the car you're leasing once the lease is up.
Okay. So contrasting that to buying a car, when you buy a car, you're still you'll still have a payment of some sort, right? So those two things are pretty similar. When you buy a car, you perhaps have a little more flexibility, but you're probably also going to have a heftier payment, depending on how much you choose to put down. But the good news is at the end of the payment term, which is typically a lot of people will end up signing a car loan for 5 years or 60 months. And at the end of that period, and there are some for less and some for more, depending on the manufacturer or maybe the bank that you're getting the loan from. And at the end of that, you own the car outright. So that's the good news. You might talk to people about something, might say something like, oh, I don't really want to have a car payment, so I don't want to get a new car. And you're maybe wondering, well, what does that mean? Doesn't everybody have a car payment? Well, you generally do, unless you've got $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in cash, and you can go and pay that up front and own the car outright. But some people might be in a period of time where they've paid off the car, and that's kind of nirvana. That's a nice place to be. But then eventually you might get the itch because your car is maybe not working the way it used to. Maybe it doesn't look quite as nice as it did when you drove it off the lot. And you can also buy a used car, right? So you can go and find a used car that still has a lot of years left in it and some value to it. So you may not have enough money to buy a used car outright. So you go to a bank or a credit union and you'll get a loan from them and buy a used car. Works much the same way. One of the things that I think is important to think about when you are buying a car is the interest rate that you're going to be paying. So it's not dissimilar from leasing a car, because there are also interest rates involved there that you want to pay attention to. But a lot of over the years, we've seen a lot of car manufacturers that their own internal financing company. So I drive an Audi, so Audi Financial Services is connected with that car manufacturer, and they try to really give good deals from time to time on interest rates to encourage people to buy their cars. So, you might even find something that's 0% interest, which that's a great deal, right? Okay, so you're not paying any interest to pay for a car over, say, 5 years or 60 months. That's pretty amazing. We're not seeing that right now in this environment. I think they're, probably 2%. Maybe you can get it down to 1.5%. If you go to a bank and get a loan, you might get a similar rate, but it might not be as low as a manufacturer could. A manufacturing financing company could offer you. If you go to a credit union, you might even get a lower rate than a bank. So there is some homework to do and some shopping that you can do for a loan and for the right interest rate. Maybe that's enough detail. Let's talk a little bit, maybe just kind of pros and cons, and maybe I'll start by I did lease one car. I mentioned earlier, I do like to buy cars because I do like to take care of them and keep them for a while. And when you lease a car, you're probably only going to have that vehicle for 3 years. You can choose to buy it out at the end of the lease, and some people do that. If you're going to put two deals side by side and you're going to know that you're going to want to own the car 5-7 years later, you're probably going to want to buy the car instead of leasing it. But there might be circumstances where you don't know at the time, you change your mind midway through, you know the vehicle, you feel like you do decide to buy it out. So it is a possibility. So you can turn the car in at the end of, say, 3 years, or you can buy it outright. The one car that I leased, we made that decision because it was newly married at the time. We knew we were going to need a bigger vehicle at some point, but we did need a car now. And we didn't want to go to that bigger vehicle, that more expensive SUV. And so we leased a sedan for my wife, and it was a great deal because we knew we could take care of the car. We weren't worried about, having any additional charges when we turned it in. We did increase the mileage when we signed the lease. So we paid a little bit more in the deal to get, say, 15,000 miles a year instead of the typical 12,000 miles a year. But then, when we were done with the lease, we handed them the keys and walked away. We may have paid a little more in insurance along the way, but otherwise it was actually pretty smooth. A lot of people that like to have a new car every 3 years, leasing makes sense. You don't have to hassle with selling your car, figuring out the timing of that. And, when you're not a car dealership, it's a little bit more difficult to sell a vehicle. So it's really easy to turn it in. You can also trade in a car if you're going to buy a car, right? So that's another option too. You can buy a car, trade it in 3 years. So either way works. It's just a little more hassle-free probably if you're leasing, if you really want to get a new car every couple of years, every 3 years.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Andy. I think your story is a good example of why leasing a car makes sense sometimes. And you've obviously done both. So it's not like once you pick a route, you have to stick with it. So I actually was talking a little bit about how I bought a car a couple years ago, and how that fits me well. So I'd like to share that a little bit and how that worked out for me. I think knowing that, like Andy said, that I wanted to drive this car for a long time. I may have the car I have right now for 15 more years. And knowing that and being committed to the style of the car, and knowing it's a reliable car, I think made me really comfortable buying the car and committing to the payments that are involved. And, it's important to recognize too, every part of the car, once you buy it, is your responsibility. So if something breaks or something goes wrong, or, you want something done to it, it's on you. So that's something to understand too. Whereas, when you're leasing a car, it's not yours to really have to manage constantly, which is a nice thing, especially if you only want it for a couple of years. So overall, buying a car, I think a tip and trick to know too is everything is online now. You search online, every dealership has their used and new cars online. You can look at the specs, you can compare prices, you can see how many miles, you can even see if used cars have been in accidents. And so if you start this journey, I urge you to do a lot of online research. And Andy talked a little bit about that with interest rates as well. There's so much at your fingertips. And once you step onto the lot, you should understand, what kind of car you're really investing in. And that way, when it comes time to sign the contracts and the papers that they like to give you piles of, you're prepared and you understand what you're committing to, and you also feel excited and proud of the car you've picked. So I would urge you guys to really invest in the upfront research, and online it's so easy now.
That's great advice, Leah. I would also just add, take your time, and don't be afraid to walk out of the dealership without a car once you've walked in. That can be one of the sales tactics, is to, once somebody walks in the door, see if you can kind of keep them there, right? Because there's a higher likelihood that they're going to make a sale to you, versus you going down the road to another dealership, or maybe thinking about it and waiting for a few months and then changing your mind on what kind of car you want. So there will be a lot of pressure, perhaps for you to make a decision on the spot. Not necessary. Of course, maybe you've done your research and you're ready. But it's always a good idea to go in, browse, talk to them a little bit, and then, be firm on your position to walk out and come back another day. I really think that's a good strategy.
I completely agree, because at the end of the day, you're their customer and they want you to buy one of their cars. And so you really do hold a lot of the power. And so if walking away and taking a moment is what you need to do, there's no issue. They will try to keep you though, like Andy said. So it's good to be prepared for that. Well, I think that kind of covers the majority of what we were planning to share with you all today. My closing thoughts are just that thank you for listening to us today. We appreciate your attention, and we really hope that the information we shared assists all of you in your journey of leasing or buying a car in the future. Have a great day.
Good luck.